It's the Underdogs back with you, and happy New Year. I'm Jordan Brenner, joined as always by my favorite person wearing a light up hat, Peter Keating. Peter,
Happy New Year, Jordan. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Health and happiness in 2025.
what are you resolving to do in this next year?
I heard somebody say, what are your New Year's resolutions? And they said the same as last year, the same as every year. And I think that's probably the truth.
Well, I resolved to start this show with an amazing list. This is part two of our two-part episode guide. No, sorry. Start again, Sarah. This is part two of our two-episode extravaganza on the 2024 best underdog moments. We hit on moments 6 through 10 last week. Now it's time for numbers 5 through 1. So let's get it going. Starting with number 5, the NC State Wolfpack with a historic late season run to win the ACC tournament and make the Final Four. On March 9th, Peter, the Pack lost their fourth straight game by 8 at Pitt to finish the regular season 17-14. The NCAA tournament wasn't even on their radar screen. And then something happened. They won 5 straight ACC tournament games, just the second team to win any conference tournament as a double-digit seed, as they were the 10 seed, and the first to win the ACCs with 5 victories in 5 days. An unbelievable accomplishment. They beat Duke, they beat Virginia, they beat Carolina, and they earned the auto berth into the NCAA tournament, where they earned an 11 seed. But that was just the appetizer.
It kept going, yeah. Mm-hmm.
As an 11 seed, they upset Texas Tech as the 6th seed. Then they beat another upsetting team, Oakland, in overtime to advance to the Sweet 16. That's where they took out Marquette by 9 in another big upset. And then they faced off with their big rivals, Duke, again. And man, after trailing 27-21 at the half, they won 76-64, advanced to the Final Four. And even though that was the end of the run, what a run it was. DJ Burns, all 500 pounds of him, scoring and spinning and turning inside. DJ Horn on the perimeter. And they tied LSU, George Mason, VCU, Loyola Chicago, and UCLA as the lowest seed to make the Final Four. What a run.
Jordan, sometimes you just have to throw up your hands and say, this is great. Just players playing at their peak at the right time. There's only a handful of 11 seeds. That's the lowest seeds ever to make the Final Four. And the others were LSU, George Mason, VCU, Loyola, UCLA. I think in each of those other cases, you and I would agree that there were statistically explainable reasons why those teams made for good underdogs. Maybe they were underrated. Maybe they were underseeded. Maybe they played really slow. Maybe they forced a lot of turnovers. Maybe they shot the lights out from beyond the arc, whatever. I have to say, I didn't see NC State coming at all and joining that league of great giant killers. But they increased the usage of their best players like Burns. Other than that, we can see it. We can see in the performance how they did, but I don't think there was a way. This is the least predictable great performance by a deep underdog, and especially considering a couple of teams they beat were teams I think we kind of liked statistically. I mean, there were reasons why Marquette might have been vulnerable, but I thought that Marquette team was something special. I really did, and I also didn't see them. Duke was up at the half against NC State and managed to lose that game. I didn't see that happening either. So this was an amazing, wonderful, really compressed, exciting underdog experience. And this is not like Texas A&M where we're sitting there saying this team leads the country in offensive rebounding. We hope they managed to do enough to get a good enough berth. This was like, okay, they got an 11 seed. I guess they deserved it. And then boom, 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 pow. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And what was cool about this is as dominant as DJ Burns was in spurts, 29 against Duke in the NCAA tournament, 20 against UNC in the ACC final, 24 against Oakland. Like, they won when he didn't play well either. He against Marquette, the arguably the best team they beat in this run, he had 4 points on 2 of 4 shooting, and they still won comfortably. So great run, great moment for Pac fans who've suffered a lot since the days of Jim Valvano as sort of the little brother to Duke and Carolina. So what a cool moment.
And look, there's a lesson here. Sometimes upstates don't have to be sustainable. Sometimes you don't have to be able to, if you reran the tape, would it all happen again? Probably not. Who cares? Sometimes they're just great moments.
Well, speaking of great moments, let's head back to the Olympics for number 4, and that was Cole Hocker, an American, winning the 1500 meters. Peter, this race was billed as a showdown between Jacob Ingebrigtsen, if did I even say that right?
Ingebrigtsen, yes.
Yep, of Norway, and Josh Kerr of Great Britain. And all of a sudden, at the very end, Cole Hocker stole the show.
It was quite amazing. Hocker was 0-7 career lifetime against Ingebrigtsen and 0-7 versus Josh Kerr. He had never beaten either one of them. And it all happened. Now, if you remember the scene, they were racing against each other very well. And for about 4 minutes, the crowd was screaming. Announcers couldn't hear each other. The play-by-play is almost completely drowned out. It was an insane scene. And then with less than 200 yards to go, less than 200 meters to go, I should say, Ingebrigtsen started to slow. And all of a sudden, he later said he was running too hard at that point.
Right. Well,
and things opened up for Cole Hocker.
Right. So this was basically between those two guys was billed as like a heavyweight match. It was no one else was even discussed. It was mano a mano, the two of them. And you're right. Ingebrigtsen later said he went out too fast. He said, I ruined it for myself by going way too hard. So he burned himself out. And then Kerr, instead of laying back, decided to chase him. So what happened was late in the race, neither of them had their finishing speed. Neither of them had a kick left. And Hocker, who sort of laid back and ran his race, was on the inside and is sort of known for good finishing speed, he just kicked it into high gear. Now, some of what makes a great underdog moment is just the fact that it's unexpected, but other times it's the way it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be remembered in part because it's so visually stunning and clear. You see this guy all of a sudden making his way. It almost nothing quite like a race enables you to see someone literally come in from behind and take out a favorite. And so this is exactly what happened. Hocker is gaining and gaining and gaining and gaining and blows past them. And I'll never forget that, watching that.
And look, sometimes, I mean, clearly the other runners themselves said there were tactical reasons why he was able to pass them. But let's not overlook the fact this was a freaking amazing performance by all the top runners. There were 4 men who ran that race in a lower time than the previous Olympic record. I mean, Ingebrigtsen and Kerr didn't win, but they ran the times that could have been good enough to win, right? And also, this is a triumph of Cole Hocker's training, his lifelong training. This is a guy who lowered his mile time by 18 seconds in a year and a half of training. I mean, he's worked all his life for this, and it paid off in that
all
stretch.
His life. He's 23 years old.
Well, yeah, but it's interesting you bring that up because 3 years ago, there's a guy named David Woods. He's a freelancer, but he's written for the Indianapolis Star. And 3 years ago, David Woods said, this guy Cole Hocker is only 20. And he's running a high-profile event, could be an Olympic champion. There are some people who saw this coming. So over this stretch, I mean, it's really paid off, and it paid off in that stretch run.
Yeah, and he did this in 3 minutes, 27.65 seconds. That was an Olympic and an American record. And what I love, just to finish this off, what I love is what he said about the race afterwards. He said, speaking personally, it can be nice to fly under the radar. I feel like I took advantage of it. If that isn't the mantra of underdogs everywhere, I don't know what is. So let's stick to things that happened in Europe, though, with number 3, Peter.
Jordan, I love this story. On the last day of the knockout stage of the Euros, number 74 in the world, Georgia, beat number 6 Portugal 2-0 in the biggest upset in the history of the Euros in soccer. And what's particularly cool about this is that in all of our years of trying to apply giant killing criteria to various sports, we've learned that underdogs usually win by pursuing high risk, high reward styles of play, right? If you go back to biblical times, Jordan, David couldn't get himself bulked up to the size of Goliath overnight, but he figured out how to take smart chances against an opponent who was objectively stronger, right? And he beat him. In soccer, because scoring is so low, you got to do whatever you can to avoid giving up even one goal. So sometimes underdogs win, or you'll see a lot of nil-nil matches that underdogs achieve by doing whatever you can to avoid one goal. You have to you fall back, fall back, fall back. Don't try to win the position game and then counter strike. There was one team that did that fanatically in the Euros, and that was Georgia. They would retreat, then they'd retreat some more. They're often played in their own end of the field against Portugal. Portugal had over 800 touches. They touched the ball more than 800 times, and Georgia was under 400. But they had more tackles, they had more clearances, and they managed to score twice. It was kind of what they did against the Czech Republic earlier when they had a 1-1 draw, and so they made it. They made it to the group stage. Now they lost to Spain, but that's okay because this is a gigantic, enormous upset produced by giant killing strategies.
Right. And that, I mean, I wonder if it would even be remembered as an even bigger upset if it had actually knocked Portugal out of the tournament. Obviously, Portugal still advanced, but like you said, soccer is ripe for upsets like this because scoring a goal is hard, and there are not a lot of them scored. So you can dominate a match and not score, and weird things can happen, right?
Yes, and I'm going to ask you to join me. Okay, I've been practicing this since the Euros in the summer. I'm going to try to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Khvicha Kvaratskhelia. Khvicha Kvaratskhelia. That's it. That's their best player's name. Took me 6 months to learn it. When we wrote our athletic
Mm-hmm.
piece about this, I wrote that we were trying to figure out how to pronounce their best player's name. That got edited out. Apparently, that was insulting. It's not insulting. It's now a tribute to Khvicha Kvaratskhelia, best player in Georgia, Euros superstar. Sir, we pay you the tribute of actually figuring out how to pronounce that name.
Is there anything you took from this that you sort of want to apply going forward in this or other sports? Like what will we study next if we could on the heels
Are
of
you
this?
daring me to try to say that name again, or are you being
No, I'm
serious?
not. Like we're always learning from upsets, right? And we're always trying to apply it to new sports. You know, I'm just thinking out loud. There are things, did it matter that it was the third match of the group stage? Do you think it's early? Should we look at where, you know what I mean? Like if a team's already qualified, or if
Yeah,
it's
look, I
fatigue, or
think in soccer and in basketball, and I'm hoping also in rugby, like what we still have to figure out is like you can't just find the teams that are really good sometimes and really bad at other times. You can't just find the teams that do these strategies because there's nothing left to do. Like if you look up the best the teams that shoot the most 3-pointers in college basketball, they're all terrible teams because they're always losing, right? If you try to look at the teams in soccer that actually play in their own end and never touch the ball, well, yeah, maybe they're trying to break brackets, or maybe they're just terrible, right? And so we have to figure out to find the squads that can turn that on when they need to. You know, what we've called the chameleon in college basketball.
Mhm.
Find that in other sports. Like figure out who's doing this tactically and who's doing this just because Spain never lets you touch the
Accidentally.
ball. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
No, it's a good point. We've got a lot more soccer coming up, and honestly, I'm already excited for the 2026 World Cup on home soil, and I want to spend more time in the bunker with you studying ways, especially because it's going to be a bigger tournament. It's going to be fun to kind of cook up ways to even more ways to project upsets. But
I'll tell you this: if cricket ever takes off here and gets really popular, I think there's probably some giant killing to studying cricket. We didn't go to the World Cup of cricket, but we should have. That was local.
yeah, well, right now I think we would just hear crickets if we tried to talk about that. But let's take a break for a moment and come back with the top 2 underdog moments of 2024 right after this. We're back, and for the number 2 underdog moment of the year, we're cheating, and we're going to combine several individual moments into one overall moment, and that's the rash of college football upsets during this past season. Okay, each week it seemed like one bigger upset than the last one, and what was super cool was they came in all sorts of varieties. You had big superpower against mid-major when Northern Illinois took out Notre Dame in September. You had conference also ran who never wins a big game against dominant national power when Vanderbilt beat Alabama in October. You had a team brand new to FBS, had never won an FBS game before, when Kennesaw State, who was a 25.5-point underdog against Liberty, won 27-24 on October 23rd. And then to finish it all off, you had an amazing rivalry that looked as one-sided as it's been in years, only to have Michigan, a 19.5-point underdog, beat Ohio State 13-10, knock them out of the Big Ten championship game, out of a potential top 4 seed in the college football playoff. Peter, it was one after another this year.
I want to stand up for Kennesaw State for just 1 minute. I think the only thing people are ever going to remember about them is that they won this game against Liberty. Kennesaw State was actually quite the FCS powerhouse. The reason they'd never won an FBS game before was because they moved up to D1. And I do want to point out that they did win another game this season. I'm just not sure it was against an FBS opponent. It was against Lynchburg of Virginia, and so this victory may stand as their big moment of triumph. I also want to say I don't know about you. Before we talk about which was the most significant or how the season developed, I think the most emotional of all these big upsets and the most affecting was probably the first one, because Northern Illinois. When I saw that,
that's interesting. Okay, I have a different answer for that.
When I saw that coach crying on national television because he was a Northern Illinois alumnus, right? It wasn't. It was an upset where it wasn't. We freaking hate Alabama. It's time we beat them. I'm finally, these rivals. It wasn't that kind of institutional rival hatred. It was just a moment meaning so much. I also am glad that Notre Dame put it together, got their offense in line. It didn't knock them out of national championship contention. That matters too. But I thought that game was an emotional high point at the beginning of the season.
Okay, so that's why to me it's not the most significant.
No, it's not. I don't mean significant, right?
I mean that I agree with everything you say about what it meant to Northern Illinois. But to your point, Notre Dame was able to rally back from it.
Yeah.
Okay. Michigan, Ohio State, incredible upset, incredible scene. Obviously, the post game brouhaha took it to another level.
Yes,
but again, it didn't get Michigan much further, and Ohio State still made the playoff.
Exactly.
So that's not my one. The Kennesaw State Liberty one, super cool, second biggest upset on the point spread, but it didn't capture national attention. To me, the most important in retrospect was Vanderbilt over Alabama for a couple reasons. One, it effectively did knock Alabama out of the playoff.
Yep.
So that, and second is like, this is Lucy in the football. This is just, Vanderbilt gets beat up and beat up and beat up by these same teams every year. And to go in and take out Alabama, the glory program of the SEC of the past decade. I mean, what a moment for their fans. What a moment of just exercising the demon. So that's why, if I had to pick one of these four, that stands out to me as the most significant this year.
I completely agree. It's the most important. It changed the trajectory of the entire college football playoff. Vanderbilt never trailed in that game, and the amazing thing is the performances by players who probably aren't going to make the NFL, right? Who didn't even look too good 2 weeks later in the rest of Vanderbilt's schedule. But I mean, they held Alabama to 84 yards rushing. When's the last time that happened? Cedric Alexander had 2 touchdowns. The quarterback, Diego Pavia, right? When they talk about him as an NFL prospect, well, first of all, we don't know whether he's going to play again or not at Vanderbilt because he has a lawsuit going about his eligibility. But when you see him on NFL draft boards, he makes it possibly as a running back because they like how he improvises. And that's a guy who outperformed Jalen Milroe, who threw a pick 6 in that game and lost a fumble. I mean, sometimes the crazy stuff happens because players who aren't going to make them again make really great plays.
Yep. All right. Well, if those were number 2, you got to be wondering what's left. What's left as the number 1 underdog moment of 2024? Peter, I think we both agreed on this one. Take it away.
Look, Kristen Faulkner won gold in a cycling road race at the Olympics. We're going to go back to the Olympics, which were a high point of the year, and it turns out a high point for underdogs, and it turns out a high point for American underdogs.
Yep. And Peter, let me just say, I can hear people saying cycling, but just if you're not familiar with this story, let Peter tell it again, because it is everything you want in an underdog story.
Look, first of all, um, there's nobody who should be dismissing the winner, the underdog winner of a 158-kilometer race. In fact, how can an underdog win a 158-kilometer race? You know, you don't see, Jordan, when's the last time you saw someone come out of nowhere to win the Tour de France? Doesn't happen. It's like 20, whatever, 400 stages of a mile each. And I mean, you have to beat the best in the world over the long haul. It's not set up for
Sure.
underdog
But give us
success.
her backstory. Give us
Okay,
this,
so look,
how this happened.
look, she grew up, go way back, Jordan. She grew up in a town called Homer, Alaska, which is a fishing village. Okay. Now, you may know this. Where'd she go to college, Jordan? Do you know? She's a proud graduate
I
of
think it was an inferior school in Boston. Is that correct?
a little school we like to call the Big H, Jordan, Harvard University. She is a computer science major. Okay. She only started racing.
Wait, and she wasn't a cyclist there. She was a rower. A
Yes.
rower. Okay.
Yeah. She graduated in 2016 and she didn't start racing until 2017. That's when she found she liked riding and riding over long distances. In fact, I just says
No, just explain how she started cycling. She started riding her bike in Central Park after taking an introductory cycling course.
right. I was just going to say she wasn't even she wasn't like sponsored by Nike or anything like that.
She never ridden a bike.
She was working in venture capital. She was working
Right.
in Bessemer Venture Partners, and then she started riding a bike through Central Park. That's how she got her start. So look, Harvard, Bessemer, I don't know if you want to call it rags to riches, but you don't have an underdog start from kind of a lower vantage point in a sport than this woman.
Imagine a pitcher being like,
amazing.
I'd never thrown a ball before. And then I
Yeah.
was having a catch in Central Park and I threw 98 miles an hour. And oh my God, I had the last out of the World Series. Okay. So she has no experience in cycling. All right. She starts riding a bike, falls in love with it, ends up moving to San Francisco to pursue it more seriously, turns pro 2 years later, quits her day job in 21 to focus on cycling full time.
And
But
just
still,
right, and
she's
just so
not
you-
at an elite level, right?
Right. In fact, this is maybe the most amazing stat of anybody on this entire Underdogs of the Year list. Right. She decided to make this a full-time pursuit. And USA Cycling, and let me preface this by saying you and I have talked about how USA Athletics and track and field and all these events have focused more of their energy and money and training resources on athletes they think they have a chance to win, right? If you're young and you're really improving fast, like we said Cole Harker was, like they'll tend to support you more. USA Cycling ran simulations and before the Olympics told Kristen Faulkner they estimated she had a 6% chance of winning a medal in a road race. That's her own federation.
Well, she wasn't even supposed to race. She was a replacement for Taylor Knibb. Okay. The U.S. itself isn't supposed. The U.S. hasn't won this event since 1984. Okay.
Right. 40
so she was
years.
an injury replacement in a sport where we don't do anything. Okay.
Right.
And suddenly she's trailing the final pack, right?
Right. So let's
Okay.
get to the race, right? Because she's facing Marianne Vos, who's a Dutch champion, an Olympic champion, Lottie Kopecky, who's also an Olympic champion from Belgium, and I believe it was Blanca Vos, not Vos, Vos from Hungary, 3 world-class championship level racers, all in this. And here's the deal, though. Here's what's really cool. She recognized. Now, look. Imagine this. If you're not familiar with road racing, think about it like an F1 race or something, right? Where there are teams of cars that sometimes cooperate, right? And if you run, you know this too. Like sometimes runners or horse racing, any kind of racing, sometimes there'll be packs kind of working together to help one runner or not. As she ran this race, she rode this race really aggressively, and it occurred to her during the race that her competition were from 3 different countries, and that they were not going to tactically work together to slow her down because they didn't want to work together with each other. So she maintained a high level of aggressiveness. Like she worked hard to pass them and not give up a lead. In fact, once she got the lead, then she said she started counting to 10 over and over and over again because she wanted to maintain that lead because she thought once she got the lead, they wouldn't one of them wouldn't like try to surge past her just to tie her out because it might help the other 2 competitors. So she actually assessed this during the race, which she rode as an injury replacement in a sport where the U.S. has not done anything for decades. and she ended up maintaining that lead and winning. It's an incredible performance.
And an amazing story in a year filled with them. I hope you enjoyed being able to go back and reminisce and remember these great moments. And here's to an even better 2025. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Keep the crazy stuff going. Keep the chaos going, and happy 2025.